And as the first light of morning touches the quiet world, you remember that you are not waking into a day you must shape with effort, but into a dream you are already dreaming. Most begin their mornings as servants of yesterday, carrying forward the same heavy thoughts, the same rehearsed expectations, the same silent agreements with lack and limitation. But you in this moment are being shown a different way. You are being called to enter the day as its author, not its subject. For every scene you will meet is but the echo of a deeper conversation, one you have with yourself in the secret place of the mind before the world even stirs. This is the hidden law. Few dare to test. The morning is not simply the beginning of time. It is the moment of planting. The first thoughts you allow, the first feeling you permit to settle. These are the seeds from which the hours will grow. And if you are careless, the soil will bear whatever was dropped into it: worry, doubt, resignation. But if you are deliberate, the day will bend itself to the image you hold as naturally as a vine turns toward the sun. Imagine for a moment that your consciousness is a still pool before the wind has touched it. The light above is perfect, undisturbed. Whatever you choose to look upon will be reflected there. This is your morning. Before you move, before you speak, before you even rise from your bed, you enter that inner pool and decide the shape of your reflection. You see yourself as you choose to be fulfilled, at peace, already possessing the life you desire, not as a wish, but as a memory, not as something you hope will arrive, but as something you cannot remember not having. Most will tell you to think positive, or set intentions, but this is not about forcing the mind into shallow affirmations. This is about slipping beneath the noise and entering the state. Feel the truth of it now. The state is the prayer. You are not speaking to God as if he were distant. You are speaking as God, shaping reality with the image you assume. For it is written, "Be still, and know that I am God. Be still, and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am already what I long to be." So as you lie there in the softness of morning, before the machinery of habit begins its noise, take this sacred pause. Let the outer world wait for you. Close your eyes again if you must, and see the scene you would most love to meet today. See it with the quiet knowing of one who remembers rather than hopes. Feel the weight of it in your chest, the ease of it in your breathing, the gratitude of it, as though you are returning to a home long prepared for you. And here is the trick. Do not get up until the feeling is set. This is the moment the potter's hands press the clay. If you rise while still thinking of the day's demands, of yesterday's wounds, you will walk in the image of those things. But if you rise having clothed yourself in the end you desire, you will meet evidence of it as surely as the seed meets the sun. You may not understand how the first scene will unfold, but that is not your work. The vine does not strain to know the path to the light. It simply turns, and the light meets it. There is a subtle joy in this practice, a quiet authority that begins to grow in you. You realize that nothing is happening to you that did not first happen within you. Even the smallest kindness you receive in the day is but the echo of a kindness you felt toward yourself in that inner chamber. And when you begin to see this link, you understand that the morning is not a beginning. It is the revealing of what was already written in the silence before. Do not underestimate how quickly the world will bow to the image you hold. The more faithfully you enter the state each morning, the more the day will seem to arrive already obeying you. But this brings us to something even more hidden, something most overlooked in this sacred work, because what you choose in those first minutes is not just shaping the day ahead, it is shaping the one thing that can never be taken from you, because the one thing that can never be taken from you is the awareness of who you are, not the name given to you, nor the form the world sees, but the eternal I behind it all. When you shape the first moments of morning, you are not merely setting a tone for the hours, you are shaping your sense of being, and as your being changes, the world must rearrange itself to mirror it. This is the deeper truth. It is not the events of the day that decide your experience, but the self you carry into them. Most believe they are reacting to life, yet in truth they are meeting only the harvest of the seed they planted in their own consciousness. The conversations you hold silently, the images you allow to linger, these are not harmless wisps of thought. They are living instructions, whispered to the unseen substance from which all things are made. The world you walk into obeys the inner word you speak, whether that word is born of fear or born of faith. When you lie in that threshold between sleep and waking, you stand at the very door of creation. In that stillness, before the senses have gathered their stories, you are unbound. It is here that you clothe yourself in the invisible garment of your choosing. If you rise clothed in lack, you will find lack greeting you at every turn. If you rise clothed in abundance, in love, in completion, then the scenes of the day will reflect that invisible choice with a strange precision. You will meet glances, words and opportunities that seem to fall from nowhere, yet they are only the world bowing to the identity you assumed in secret. It is written, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." The heart here is not the organ, but the deep feeling of being, the place where thought becomes flesh. In those first moments, you are not trying to persuade the world to change. You are persuading yourself into the awareness of who you already are in truth. And when that awareness takes root, no force on earth can keep the reflection from appearing. Feel this now. Close your eyes to the memory of the night just past. Let the mind loosen its grip on the familiar weight of yesterday. See instead the image of yourself already living in the end you have chosen. You may picture a single scene, a room, a letter, a hand you hold, or you may simply feel the atmosphere of your desired life as though it were the very air around you. Rest there until it feels inevitable. This is not effort, it is surrender. You are surrendering the lesser self to the greater one that has always been waiting in the wings, and as you do, something quiet begins to shift. You no longer watch for the outer proof, because the inner proof has already been received. You carry yourself differently, even before you move a muscle. You find that the day no longer feels like something to conquer. It feels like a stage already set for your entrance. There is no need to strain or hurry. The moment you rise from that bed, you are stepping into the echo of a truth already declared. You will notice as this becomes your way, that the people around you will respond to a change they cannot name. They may say you seem lighter, more certain, more present, but you will know it is simply the reflection of the self you dressed in at dawn. And every morning that you repeat this, the garment becomes more natural to wear, until you forget there was ever a time you clothed yourself in anything else. Yet within this practice lies a mystery deeper still, one that speaks not just to the shaping of a day, but to the rewriting of an entire life. For the identity you choose in those quiet moments does not die when the sun sets. It begins to weave itself through the nights and the mornings, until the old self is but a shadow, and the new one stands in its place. And when you understand how this change of self becomes permanent, you will see that reality itself bends, not just for the day, but for the whole of your being. It begins almost imperceptibly, like the slow turning of a tide you do not notice until the shore is entirely transformed. The self you awaken to each morning becomes the root from which every branch of your life grows, and with each dawn you faithfully assume the greater. The old roots loosen, and the tree of your former identity withers quietly in the background. No struggle, no battle, only the steady replacement of shadow with substance, of pretending with knowing. This is why the mornings are sacred. They are not a race to meet the day's demands, but a temple in which you consecrate yourself to the truth you have chosen. When the world still slumbers, you walk alone in the inner garden and tend to the seeds you have planted in the dark soil of your mind. You do not dig them up to see if they are growing. You water them with attention and warmth. You understand that life obeys not the frantic gesture, but the consistent inner knowing. Think of the way the sun rises. It does not rush. It does not strain. It simply appears, and the world must respond. This is the posture you take in those first waking moments, calm, certain, already shining from within. You are not trying to force the day into shape. You are remembering that it is already shaped by the self you now inhabit. You rest in that truth until it feels so real that the question of whether it will manifest fades entirely from your mind. Here lies a great secret. What you consistently feel yourself to be becomes natural, and what is natural for you will inevitably externalize. If you persist in assuming that you are prosperous, loved, secure, then even if the mirror of today shows otherwise, the deeper law is already at work, reshaping the reflection. The world is a patient listener. It will not resist the self you insist upon being. In these quiet mornings, when the senses have not yet gathered their evidence, you can bypass the tyranny of appearances. You can feel wealthy even if your purse is light. You can feel loved even if the room is empty. You can feel healthy even if the body aches. For in that sacred pause between sleeping and waking, you are not bound by what was. You are free to declare what is. And the declaration is not made with words alone, but with the deep saturation of feeling, the absolute acceptance that what you imagine is the only truth. The mind, once clothed in this new state, carries it into every gesture, every glance, every tone of voice throughout the day. Others feel it, though they may not name it. Circumstances bend to accommodate it, though they may appear to arrive by chance. And because the change is rooted within, no outward condition can take it from you. You may lose the trappings, but the cause remains untouched, ready to produce again. Do not be surprised if, as you continue, the old self resists. You may hear faint whispers of doubt, habits that try to pull you back into the familiar shadows, but you will also find that the more often you return to the stillness each morning, the less power those echoes hold. The new garment begins to fit so well that the thought of wearing the old one feels unnatural, even impossible. And then comes the most astonishing realization that the self you have been assuming is not something you created at all. It is the true self, the eternal self remembered at last. The mornings are not a time for building something new, but for unveiling what has always been present beneath the layers of forgetfulness. This is why the practice feels like coming home, and why the more you persist, the more effortless it becomes. Yet even this is not the end of the mystery, for when you realize that every morning's choice is not merely altering your life, but revealing your eternal nature, a deeper question stirs. If this is true of a day, what happens when you live this way without ceasing, not just upon waking, but in every moment of your being? It begins to dawn on you that the morning ritual is but the opening of a greater doorway, one that need never close. If the self you choose upon waking carries such power to shape the hours ahead, what might happen if you guarded that awareness through every breath of the day? You start to see that consciousness is not meant to be touched only at sunrise, and then set aside. It is the very fabric in which you live and move. The mornings simply remind you of the truth that is always present, like the first chime of a bell whose tone lingers long after the strike. You realize that your life is not built in the moments of effort, but in the quiet choices of identity you make when no one is watching. The instant you notice yourself drifting back into the old garment, you can return, without ceremony, without delay, to the inner stillness, where the new self already stands. You do not plead for it to appear, you inhabit it. And the more you return, the shorter the distance becomes, until the old self feels like a faded dream, and the new one is simply who you are. This is where the law of assumption reveals its full majesty. It does not respond to scattered desires, to occasional moments of faith quickly overtaken by doubt. It responds to the sustained knowing of who you are in truth. Just as a melody becomes memorable only when it is repeated, your assumed identity becomes natural when it is rehearsed in the heart again and again, without strain. You are not forcing reality, you are wearing it. The world begins to confirm this without your asking. People speak to you differently, not because they have changed, but because you have. Circumstances appear to shift of their own accord, yet you know they are only following the shape you carry within. Even the smallest events take on new meaning, for you begin to see them as threads in a design already chosen. The hurried driver lets you merge into the lane. The conversation turns toward the very opportunity you have been living in your imagination. The solution to an old problem arrives in the simplest of forms. Each is a mirror, showing you the self you have decided to be. And here, another layer of the mystery unfolds. You begin to see that what you choose to be is not only shaping what comes to you, but what you can even recognize as yours. The old self would pass by a door without knocking, believing it was locked. The new self sees the same door and walks through without hesitation, for in its world, the way is already open. What once seemed impossible becomes inevitable, not because the world has softened, but because your own nature has shifted into harmony with it. This is why it is written, "To him that hath shall be given." The one who possesses the feeling of the wish fulfilled will be given more evidence of it. The one who lacks that feeling, no matter how much they seek, will find it slipping away. For the outer is only the shadow of the inner, and the shadow can never lead the light, it can only follow. So when the morning comes, you are not preparing for life to happen, you are stepping into a play already written in the secret. And when you keep that awareness alive beyond the first hour, you find that the world no longer surprises you in the old way. Its events do not appear as strangers, but as old friends arriving in the form you most desire. Yet in this deepening of the practice, a question arises. If you can live as this chosen self in every moment, unbroken by circumstance, what then becomes of time itself? Does the future still stretch before you as an unknown path, or does it stand already complete, waiting only for you to walk its scenes in perfect trust? You start to feel that time itself is not a line you must walk but a field you are already standing in, where every path is present at once. The future is not something approaching from the distance, it is a selection, waiting for your recognition. The self you choose each morning is not marching toward its destiny, it is simply aligning with the scene that already belongs to it. And once that alignment is felt, the events of the day unfold not as random occurrences, but as the natural order of the reality you have claimed. This is why the mornings carry such weight. They are your moment of choosing, not just for the next few hours, but for the thread of life you will weave into the eternal tapestry. Each time you wake, you stand at the gate of many worlds. One leads to more of what you have known, another leads to what you have only dared to imagine. You do not have to open both. The key is always in your pocket, and it is always turned by feeling. Think of a great stage, already built, with countless plays written and rehearsed. Each morning, you step into the wings and decide which costume to wear. The moment you put it on, the script, the scenery, and the other players adjust themselves accordingly. You need not memorize the lines or push the scenes forward. The story carries you, because you have entered its world by choice. Most rush into the day without changing their garment. They step into the same role they played yesterday, and so the same story repeats. But you have begun to see that the role itself changes the entire play. If you rise in the role of the beloved, the events that meet you will confirm that identity. If you rise in the role of the overlooked, they will echo that instead. The choice is not made in the marketplace, it is made in the quiet chamber of your imagination, before the curtain lifts. This is not to say that you must think of every detail or control every act. The law is not mechanical, it is organic, alive. When you feel yourself to be something, the unseen currents arrange the scene for you. A letter arrives, a conversation turns, a door opens in a way you could not have designed, and yet it fits perfectly, as though it were written only for you, because in truth it was. You begin to notice that the mornings are not only a time for setting the self, but also for letting go of yesterday's unfinished lines, of the tension of trying to manage the outer play. The more you release, the more you find that the right lines, the right people, the right opportunities step forward, without strain. It is as if the universe itself prefers to obey the one who is still enough to know it already has. There is a peace in this that words can barely touch. You wake, and instead of bracing yourself against what may come, you feel as one who has already arrived. You are not meeting strangers in the hours ahead, you are meeting scenes from a story you have already lived within. Even the surprises feel familiar, as though they were woven into the script before you could remember. And as this awareness deepens, the question of how begins to dissolve. You no longer ask how the world will rearrange itself, any more than you ask how a seed becomes a tree. You know it will, because it must. The seed holds the pattern, and your chosen self holds the pattern. The outer world can only give birth to what is already present within. But when you see this so clearly, another realization stirs. If the stage, the play, the costume, and the lines all bend to the self you assume, then perhaps nothing in your world has ever been fixed at all. Perhaps even the past, which you thought was unchangeable, waits to be rewritten by the hand of the self you choose now. It may seem strange at first, to think of the past as something that yields to the present choice, but as you begin to live in this awareness, you feel the edges of time soften. The memory you hold of what was is not a fixed stone, it is a living picture, painted in the same medium as the future you imagine. Just as you choose the self you will carry into the coming hours, you may also choose the self who has already walked through the hours behind you. The morning becomes not only a beginning, but a place of revision, where yesterday is reclothed in the image of your desire, and by this subtle change the entire landscape of today is altered. For what is a memory but an inner scene, held in feeling? And if feeling is the root of all creation, then to change the feeling is to change the seed from which the present grows. You may close your eyes before rising and bring to mind some event, perhaps one that did not go as you wished. Instead of replaying it with the old sting of disappointment, you may allow it to dissolve into the scene as it ought to have been. You hear the words you wish to hear, you see the outcome as you would have it, you feel the warmth and satisfaction of that perfect conclusion. You remain there until it is the only version you can recall, and though you may tell yourself this is only imagination, you will notice in the hours that follow, that the effects of that event in your present life begin to shift. The people involved seem to meet you differently, as if a silent misunderstanding has been cleared. The heaviness you carried is gone,
replaced by a calm certainty. Even the circumstances that had sprung from that moment begin to change their shape. This is not coincidence, it is law. The past, like the future, obeys the state you assume now. It is here that the morning practice takes on an even deeper power. You are no longer just choosing who you will be today. You are harmonizing your entire line of being to match the truth you have claimed. There is a strange beauty in this, a freedom that feels almost too vast to hold. The past cannot imprison you when it is made of the same substance you used to create the future. The moment you see this, the chains fall silently away, and so you begin to use the early stillness, not only to pluck seeds forward, but to heal and revise backward. You realize that the inner chamber has no doors or windows bound by time. It opens to every point in your experience. You may step into a childhood memory, and pour into it the love and safety you once lacked. You may revisit a loss and find it transformed into a gift. You may take the most ordinary of yesterdays, and infuse it with quiet joy, so that its fruits in the present grow sweet. This is the fullness of living in the end, for the end you live in is not confined to the hours ahead. It reaches back and draws every moment into its harmony. When you wake and clothe yourself in the desired state, that state extends its garments over what was, as well as what is to come. The whole of your life bends to match the self you have chosen, like a great river adjusting its course around a new center of gravity. You see then why the words, "I am the Alpha and the Omega," are not bound to the page of scripture but are alive within you. You are the beginning and the end of your own creation, and in the stillness of morning, you hold both in your hands. And yet this is only the threshold, for once you understand that time in its entirety is pliable, a greater question rises quietly from within. If all moments bend to the self you assume, what is this self truly, that commands both past and future without effort?
It begins to dawn on you that the self which commands both past and future is not a temporary arrangement of personality or circumstance, but something eternal, unchanging, unbound, forever present. It is the I that stands before the thought of I am this or I am that. It wears identities the way an actor wears costumes, but it is never the costume itself. And each morning, when you deliberately choose the garment of your day, you are brushing against the truth of this formless self, the silent witness who shapes all form. This awareness is unlike anything you have felt before. It is not an emotion, though it carries a deep peace. It is not an idea, though it contains all wisdom. It is the stillness from which every image rises and to which every image returns. And as you dwell in it, you realize that the mental trick you have been practicing each morning is not a mere tool to rearrange the outer world. It is a way of remembering that the outer world has never been separate from you. This is why the law of assumption works without fail. It is not persuading something outside of you to deliver what you ask. It is the recognition that the same awareness, imagining the desire, is the awareness in which the desire is already fulfilled. When you say, "I am," and add to it the qualities you wish to experience, you are not calling them from a distance. You are naming what is already present in the vast storehouse of being. The act of assuming is the act of claiming your own reflection. The mornings make this clear, because the mind is not yet weighed down by the noise of the day. In that half-waking quiet, you can feel the gap between who you truly are and the roles you have been playing. You see that the moment you decide to inhabit a new state, the scenery begins to shift in obedience, and you see that the one making the decision is not bound to any state at all. There is a great freedom in this. You are no longer afraid to let go of the old stories, for you know they are not you, they are only the garments you once wore. You are no longer anxious about the future, for you understand that it will arise in harmony with whatever you choose to be now. And you are no longer trapped by the past, for you know it can be revised to match your present choice. The eternal self is untouched, unscarred, free to assume anything at any time. This is why the sages speak of awakening. It is not the gaining of something new, but the recognition of what has always been true. You are the one who said I am before you said I am poor, or I am unworthy. You are the light before it was colored by the glass of circumstance. When you rise in the morning and deliberately say, I am loved, I am whole, I am at peace, you are simply letting the pure light shine through a different window. And yet as this truth deepens, you find that even the practice itself begins to change. At first you chose the new garment in order to see new results in the outer world. Now you choose it for the sheer joy of expressing more of the truth. The manifestations become less about fixing something broken and more about revealing the beauty that was always hidden in you. Life begins to feel less like a problem to solve and more like a song to be sung. Still, there remains one more veil to lift. For if you are this eternal awareness, untouched by time, unbound by form, then the states you enter are not steps toward your desire, they are the desire already made flesh. Which means that even the idea of waiting for it to appear is an illusion. And when this is seen clearly, the entire rhythm of life changes, for you no longer live in anticipation, but in the holy immediacy of now. It is in this holy immediacy that you feel the final illusion dissolve, the illusion of distance between yourself and the thing you desire. You see now that waiting was only a habit of the old self, a posture learned from believing in a world outside of your own being. In truth, the desire has never been apart from you, never a thing to be fetched or earned. It has lived within you as a completed fact, from the moment you became aware of it, for awareness itself is its birth. The outer arrival is only the shadow catching up to the light. This changes the way you wake in the morning. You no longer open your eyes as one looking forward to something hoped for, but as one rising into what already is. You lie there in the quiet, and let the fullness of the end state wash through you, not reaching for it, not asking for it, but wearing it as naturally as your own breath. And because you are no longer measuring the distance to your desire, there is no sense of lack to carry into the day, only the richness of a completed work. It is like stepping into a painting that has always been hanging in the gallery of your soul. At first you may have admired it from afar, thinking it belonged to another, but now you step forward, pass through the frame, and find that every color, every detail, responds to your touch. The world outside begins to take on the hues of that painting, and you realize it is not because something new has been added, but because you have finally taken your place inside the scene. Here is the deeper beauty. When you live as though it is already done, the outer world rushes to reflect your certainty, not because it is being forced, but because it has no choice. It must follow the pattern you are impressing upon it. A conversation turns, a message arrives, a door swings open, yet none of these feel like signs you are on the way. They feel like the natural expression of what has been true all along. This is the secret that turns the mental trick of morning into the constant awareness of life. You are not walking toward the end, you are walking from it. The day ahead is not a blank page waiting for you to write upon it. It is the unfolding of a story that is already complete in the unseen. Each scene you meet is simply the outer echo of an inner chapter you have already read in the stillness of your heart, and in this way, the mornings become even more restful. You no longer strain to get into the state, because the state has become your home. You rise, you breathe, you move about the room, and every action carries the quiet authority of one who already has. The effort has vanished, replaced by a kind of sacred ease. You are not keeping up a practice, you are inhabiting your nature. It is here that you begin to notice a strange reversal. The outer results, which once held so much importance, now feel secondary. They still come, often with breathtaking precision, but your joy is no longer tied to them. The real treasure is the constant awareness of being, the knowing that nothing is missing, that nothing can be taken, that nothing needs to be chased, and from this awareness, everything flows without resistance. Yet as serene as this feels, another layer calls to you, a question that is not urgent, but luminous, almost like a whisper in the deep. If all desire is already fulfilled in the instant it is conceived, if you are forever living from the end, whether you see it or not, then what is the true purpose of imagining at all? What is it that the act of assumption is truly revealing about the nature of who you are? Perhaps the true purpose of imagining is not to bring something into being, but to awaken you to the fact that it already exists within you. Each desire is a kind of messenger, not from a distant realm, but from the depths of your own being, calling you to recognize another facet of yourself. You think you long for the thing, a home, a relationship, a healing, but in truth, you are longing to remember the self who already possesses it. The act of assumption is not creation in the sense of making something new, it is revelation, the lifting of a veil from what has always been. When this is seen, the mornings take on an even greater sweetness. You no longer wake to a list of tasks or an unfinished road, but to a moment of unveiling. The quiet before the world begins is like the hush before a curtain rises. You close your eyes and step onto the stage of imagination, not to force a scene into existence, but to recognize the scene that has been waiting for you all along. And when you play your part there with sincerity, the outer stage must echo it faithfully. It is written, before they call, I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear.
This is the secret that undoes all struggle. The answer precedes the asking, because the desire and its fulfillment are born together, like two sides of the same coin. You imagine not to summon, but to align. You feel the end not to reach it, but to stand where you have always stood, though you had forgotten. This changes the texture of your assumption. It is no longer heavy with effort or urgency. You do not cling to the image as though it might slip away. You hold it lightly, as one would hold the memory of a beloved moment, knowing it is yours, knowing it cannot be lost. This lightness is not weakness, it is mastery, for the one who truly knows does not need to grasp, and from this place, even the so-called delays become beautiful. You see them not as gaps between desire and fulfillment, but as the gentle unfolding of a scene already complete. The flower does not rush to bloom, yet its perfection is present in the seed. The morning dew does not command the sun to rise, yet it knows the light will come. You begin to trust this rhythm in your own life, knowing that the form of your desire will reveal itself in the most natural and perfect way, simply because it must. The more you rest in this awareness, the more you feel a quiet delight in the smallest things. A ray of light falling across the floor seems to confirm the abundance you have assumed. A kind word from a stranger feels like the echo of the love you already know yourself to be. Life itself begins to speak to you in a language beyond words, answering your state at every turn. And yet, as tender as this awareness is, it begins to point you towards something even greater. For if every desire is already contained within you, if every image you assume is only revealing what you are, then perhaps the real journey is not toward having, but toward knowing the fullness of your being. And in that fullness, you may find that the desires themselves begin to change, growing deeper, purer, more radiant, until they are no longer about the outer form at all, but about expressing the infinite nature of the self. And so the mornings become less about acquiring what you once thought you lacked, and more about allowing the radiance of who you are to take form in ways the mind could never have planned. You begin to notice that certain desires fall away, not because you have given up on them, but because you have outgrown the version of yourself who once needed them for validation. In their place, rise new longings, gentler, yet more profound, born not from a sense of deficiency, but from the joy of expressing abundance. This is the quiet transformation, the shift from seeking to sharing, from getting to giving, from filling an emptiness, to letting an overflowing cup pour out into the world. You wake, and in that first stillness, you no longer ask, what can I draw to myself today? But rather, what beauty of my being will I allow to shine forth? This is not self-denial, it is the deepest self-recognition. For to express love, you must know yourself as love. To express wisdom, you must feel yourself as wisdom. And what you truly feel yourself to be, will not only move through you, it will return to you multiplied. It is here that the law of assumption reveals its most tender face. You see that to assume a state is not to force a reality, but to open the door for life to meet you in your chosen nature. The world becomes a mirror that reflects back your own givingness, your own radiance. If you rise in the state of peace, you will find peace greeting you in unexpected corners. If you rise in the state of generosity, the day will seem eager to return the gesture. It is not magic in the sense of manipulation, it is the simple inevitable outflow of who you have decided you are. This way of living dissolves the old strain, the subtle anxiety that once accompanied your imaginings. You no longer fear that you might break the state, or lose your manifestation, because you understand that the outer result is not the source of your fulfillment, it is the echo. The source is you, the self you clothe in the morning, and carry through the day. The echo must sound, but its tone will always match the note you have struck within. And in this recognition, something even deeper stirs. You realize that the very act of imagining is communion. It is the meeting of yourself with yourself, the finite personality with the infinite awareness that gives it life. When you close your eyes upon waking and see yourself living the end, you are not creating a dream to one day inhabit. You are stepping into union with the eternal reality that holds every possibility. You are drinking from the well of your own being, and the water is sweet because it is yours. This communion becomes so natural that the boundary between morning practice and daily life begins to fade. The stillness you once touched only upon waking follows you into the noise of the world. The inner vision you once had to deliberately recall becomes the background of all your seeing, and the peace that was once a fragile volatile moment, now becomes the ground upon which you walk, steady and unshakable. Yet as this steadiness grows, so too does the awareness that the self you are expressing is still only a glimmer of the whole. There is more, always more, hidden within the light of I am, and every desire, every assumption, every fulfilled vision is but another step deeper into that light. The question begins to rise, softly but insistently: if all that I imagine is already mine, and all that I desire is only a fragment of my own being revealed, then what would it mean to live in the unbroken remembrance of my infinite self? To live in the unbroken remembrance of your infinite self is to awaken from the dream of separation entirely. It is to know, not as an idea, but as the constant atmosphere of your being, that every face you meet, every word you hear, every scene you walk through is your own consciousness made visible. In this awareness, the outer world no longer feels like a place you must navigate carefully. It becomes a mirror you gaze into with wonder, recognizing yourself in every reflection. The mornings become less a preparation and more a continuation of this recognition. You open your eyes not to enter a world, but to watch a world arise within you. You do not need to reach for the state, for the state has become your dwelling. You may still enjoy the quiet ritual of assumption, seeing yourself in the end, feeling the richness of the fulfilled desire, but now it is more like adding color to a painting whose form is already complete. The joy is in the expression, not in the attainment, and here something subtle, yet profound happens. You begin to feel that the desires themselves are being given to you, not as things to grasp, but as invitations to expand into greater awareness of who you are. Each longing is a knock at the door of your own infinite house, asking you to open another room. Some desires are small and fleeting, others are vast and life-altering, but all of them are doorways into deeper union with yourself. When you understand this, you no longer resist the appearance of desire, nor do you cling to it as if it were scarce. You welcome it, knowing it arrives with its fulfillment already woven into its being. You welcome it, knowing that to assume it is to accept a larger vision of yourself. And as you accept more and more of these visions, your sense of I am grows broader, softer, more luminous. It is written, all things are yours, and ye are Christ's, and Christ is God's. The words no longer sound like poetry from a distant age. They feel like the simplest statement of fact. If all things are mine, then nothing is foreign to me. If nothing is foreign, then the world is no longer a place of strangers, but a living extension of my own being. To walk in this knowledge is to carry heaven with you, for heaven is nothing more than the full awareness of your unity with all. The mornings, then, are not just the start of a day, they are a gentle reminder of the whole truth. When you first wake, and the mind has not yet fastened itself to the noise of the world, you stand in the same clear air that the saints and prophets breathed. You remember that to imagine is divine, that to feel is to create, that to live in the end is to live in God. And as you rise from that quiet bed, you are not stepping into uncertainty, you are stepping into your own reflection, one you have already blessed in the secret place. From here, even the idea of practice begins to dissolve. You do not so much set aside time for assumption, as you find that your entire life is assumption, every thought, every word, every gesture flowing from the self you have chosen. And when that self is chosen consciously, in alignment with the truth of your being, the world cannot help but sing it back to you in countless forms. Yet there remains a mystery still deeper than this, one that draws you beyond the personal desire, beyond even the joy of manifestation, into the silence from which all imagining springs. For in that silence, there is no end to live in, there is only the eternal now, whole and complete. And once you taste that stillness, you may find that the most profound morning you will ever know is the one in which you awaken and feel no need to change a thing, because you have become the thing itself. There is a peculiar freedom in awakening, without the impulse to reach for anything. It is the freedom of knowing that you are already standing in the center of all you once sought. The morning light touches your face, and instead of stirring you to action, it simply reveals what has always been there. The walls, the air, the stillness, all seem to hum with the same truth. Nothing is missing. You are not preparing to live, you are already living, and in that recognition, the day feels like a gift you cannot lose. This does not mean that desires vanish. They still arise, but they do so gently, like petals opening in the warmth of the sun. They are no longer demands pressed upon the universe, they are expressions of the fullness already within you. To imagine in this state is not to correct a lack, but to let the inner abundance take shape in a form you can touch and share. Each scene you assume is simply another way to savor what you already are. It is here that the law of assumption becomes effortless. You are not trying to force a feeling, because the feeling is the starting point. You are not struggling to maintain a state, because the state has become as natural as breathing. Even if the mind wanders into old patterns for a moment, you return without effort, as one might return to a warm room after stepping briefly into the cold. The warmth was always there. You simply stepped back inside, and the more you live this way, the more you begin to notice that the line between inner and outer has all but dissolved. You no longer feel as though you are carrying a secret vision the world cannot see. The world seems to know. It reflects your inner state with such immediacy that the delay between assumption and manifestation grows faint, sometimes vanishing entirely. A thought crosses your mind, and soon after, it meets you in form. A feeling settles in your heart, and without searching, its likeness appears before your eyes. You begin to walk through life as one moving within a living mirror, every surface reflecting the tone you carry. This is not arrogance, it is communion. You feel the unity of being so deeply that you can no longer believe in a hostile or indifferent universe. The very air feels intimate, responsive, alive with recognition. You find yourself speaking inwardly to life as though to a dear friend, and life answers, not in grand displays alone, but in small, precise, perfect ways that leave no doubt it has heard you. It is written, the kingdom of God is within you. In these mornings, you feel what that means, not as doctrine, but as fact. The kingdom is not a distant realm to be entered after some future trial. It is the field in which you are now standing, the place from which all images rise, and to which they return. Every morning you open your eyes within that kingdom, whether you remember it or not. The trick, the sacred practice, is simply to remember before you rise, and as this remembering becomes more constant, the fear of change evaporates. You no longer dread what may come, because you understand that nothing can arrive that does not match the self you have assumed. And if something seems out of tune, you need not wrestle with it. You simply return to the center, assume anew, and watch as the reflection shifts. Yet even here, with the mirror so clear and the kingdom so near, there remains a whisper, a pull towards something even quieter. It is the invitation not just to live in the end, but to live beyond all ends, in the place where the desire and its fulfillment are the same breath, where every scene is already whole before it is seen. And in that place, the mornings become not just the starting point of the day, but the doorway into the eternal moment that never truly ends.
To step through that doorway into the eternal moment is to feel the weight of time loosen its hold on you entirely. You no longer think of life as a sequence of hours to be managed, nor do you measure progress by the passing of days. Instead, there is a sense of being anchored in a still point from which all things arise. The morning becomes less the beginning of something and more a gentle unveiling of what has always been. You wake not into a line of events, but into the fullness of a completed whole, as though every scene of your life is already present, quietly waiting for your recognition. In this still point, the concept of living in the end takes on its purest meaning. You are not moving toward the end as a destination. You are standing within it, letting it reveal itself in ever-unfolding detail. The so-called future is no longer a mystery to be solved, but a treasure to be explored. You walk into each moment, not to find your desire, but to discover the countless ways it can express itself in form. And because you no longer cling to the desire as if it were scarce, you find it greeting you more often, in more ways than you ever imagined. The outer world seems eager to offer you evidence, not because you demand it, but because you have ceased to doubt its presence. You carry yourself like one who knows the banquet is already prepared, and so you do not scramble for scraps. You simply take your seat. This changes the texture of your inner speech as well. Where once you might have repeated affirmations to convince yourself, now your inner conversations are the natural language of one who already lives in the reality they desire. You do not plead. You converse. You do not command with strain. You speak with the ease of possession. And because the world is but the echo of this inner dialogue, it answers you with equal ease. Even the simplest moments of the morning, pouring water into a glass, opening a window to the air, become imbued with this awareness. You sense that each small act is part of the scene you have assumed. Nothing is mundane. Nothing is outside the reach of the self you have chosen. It is all of one piece, one fabric, one seamless garment of being, and you wear it not as an effort, but as your nature. It is written, before Abraham was I am. In the quiet you feel the truth of this. The I am that you are is before every story, every state, every morning and every night. It plays within the roles you assume. yet remains untouched by them. And from this place assuming a new state becomes as simple as breathing. It is the play of form upon an unchanging foundation. When you wake and dwell here, you no longer fear that the outer reflection might shift in unwanted ways. You know that every shift will match the tone you hold, and the tone is always within your keeping. You are the one who strikes the note. The world cannot help but harmonize. Yet there is a softness in this mastery, for you are not holding the state with rigid hands. You are letting it live through you, letting it express itself in the way the seed expresses the tree. And because you trust this process so fully, you find yourself relaxing into it more deeply each day, as though being carried on a current that has no end. But even in this serenity, something in you wonders, if the self that assumes is eternal, and the states are infinite, what lies beyond the play of states altogether? What is found when you step not only into the end of a desire, but into the place where all desires are already fulfilled, and no assumption is needed at all? To enter the place where all desires are already fulfilled, is to find yourself in a silence, so complete it feels as though the whole world is holding its breath. There is no longing here, for nothing is missing. There is no striving, for nothing is withheld. It is not the stillness of emptiness, but the stillness of completion, a fullness so absolute, that even the idea of asking dissolves. You are no longer shaping states to meet a desire. You are resting in the awareness from which all states arise. Here the mornings feel different. You open your eyes, and sense no gap between yourself and what you once hoped to receive. The impulse to assume the end remains, but it is no longer born from need. It is born from joy, from the sheer pleasure of playing with the infinite palette of your being. You are like an artist who no longer paints to fill a gallery, but because the act of creating is its own reward. This is where the law of assumption reveals its highest truth, that it was never about getting, but about remembering. The moment you imagine, you are not calling something forth from a distance. You are touching it within yourself. The form may appear later in time, but the reality is present now, as close as your own breath. To know this is to be free from the tyranny of appearances, for you no longer judge reality by what the senses show in this fleeting moment. And because you rest here, the outer reflection becomes remarkably fluid. What once took effort to manifest now arrives with such ease it feels almost like breathing. A thought of kindness arises within you, and kindness meets you in the street. An image of abundance passes through your mind, and opportunities appear without planning. The more you dwell in the fullness, the more the world seems to conspire in your favor, not as a servant, but as an inseparable part of you. You may still enjoy shaping the details of a day upon waking, seeing yourself in a desired scene, feeling its reality, but now you do so lightly, as one arranging flowers on a table already set for the feast. There is no urgency in the placement, no fear of scarcity. There is only the delight of expression, and the flowers, like the moments of your day, fall perfectly into place. It is written, "My cup runneth over." You understand now that this is not a poetic hope, but a present fact of being. The cup is never empty. It is the awareness in which all things pour forth. To live with this knowing is to stop clutching at the flow, and to start marveling at its constancy. Even when a desire comes, you greet it as an old friend, knowing it has brought its fulfillment with it. From this vantage, the morning practice transforms again. It becomes less a method, and more a gentle act of alignment, a moment of still recognition before you step into the stream of the day. You no longer need to prepare the mind for trust. You live in trust. You no longer need to create the feeling. You rise already feeling it. The practice and the life have merged into one seamless awareness. Yet even here, standing in this abundance, a quiet realization begins to dawn. The self that experiences fulfillment is the same self that once believed in lack, and both are but roles played upon a stage that is endless. What then is the stage itself? What is this boundless space in which every desire, every fulfillment, every morning rises and sets like the sun? The answer to that question is not found in words, but in the same stillness that first greets you when you wake. That stillness is the stage upon which all the movements of life appear. It is not touched by the roles you play, or the desires you assume. It does not rejoice more when you prosper, or mourn when you falter. It simply is, and yet without it, nothing could exist. Every scene, every sound, every breath is held within it, like a reflection upon a calm lake. When you sense this, even for a moment, the grip of striving loosens. You understand that what you truly are has never been in need, for it has never been outside of wholeness. To wake in the morning with this awareness is to rise into freedom before a single step is taken. You may still choose your state, still dress yourself in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, but you do so knowing that beneath it all is the changeless I am, the vast presence that wears every state, without being bound by any. You feel yourself to be the actor in the stage, the dreamer in the dream, the painter in the canvas. From here the law of assumption takes on a new light. You see that assuming the end is not about bending the world to your will, it is about allowing the world to reveal what has always been contained within the stillness. Every imagined scene, every fulfilled feeling is like a ripple upon that lake, moving outward yet never leaving its source. You are both the cause and the witness, both the one who stirs the waters and the waters themselves, and so the mornings become a time of quiet recognition rather than striving. You rest before the day, feeling the self you choose to embody, and yet you are not afraid if the feeling shifts, because you know the source remains unchanged. It is like standing in a garden, where every flower is rooted in the same soil. Whether one blooms or fades, the ground is still rich, ready to bring forth more. It is written, "In him we live and move and have our being." You feel this not as a metaphor, but as an ever-present fact. The him is not distant, it is the awareness in which you are thinking these thoughts, the awareness in which the morning light falls, the awareness in which even your heartbeat is felt. You cannot step outside of it, for there is nothing outside of it. And when you imagine, you are not sending a request to it, you are shaping its reflection. This knowledge brings a softness to your practice. The urgency fades, the need to do it right dissolves. You understand that there is no failure in assumption, because the source is infinite and forever responsive. If one image passes without forming in the outer world, another rises with equal life. You are never without the power to assume again, and again and again, each time drawing from the same inexhaustible well. And so when you rise, you do so with a calm joy. You may choose to picture a single perfect scene for the day, or you may simply rest in the feeling of being already fulfilled, already complete. Either way, you know the outer must answer, for it has no life apart from you. And when it answers, you receive it as one receives the echo of their own voice, familiar, expected, inevitable. But in the deepest quiet, another knowing stirs, one that is less about what you can create, and more about what you are without the need to create at all. You begin to wonder if the highest form of this morning awareness is not to choose a single state, but to live from the unshaped boundless self from which all states arise. And if that is so, what kind of life might unfold, when you no longer step into the day as someone becoming, but as the one who already is, without beginning or end. To live as the one who already is, without beginning or end, is to move through the day, as though carried by an unseen current that cannot falter. You no longer awaken into the question, "What must I do to become?" but into the certainty, "I am." It is the simplest of statements, yet it carries the weight of eternity. In it there is no effort to add or subtract, no fear of loss, no measuring of how far you have come. It is a state of being that needs nothing to confirm itself, for it is its own confirmation. When you rise in this awareness, the morning feels different. You may still choose to imagine a scene, or clothe yourself in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, but now it is more like selecting a garment from an overflowing wardrobe. There is no shortage. You are not dressing to cover a lack, you are dressing to express a mood, to bring forth a particular shade of the infinite that you are. Each state you assume becomes a lens through which the day will shine, and yet you know you are not limited to any single lens. From this place, the law of assumption becomes less a tool, and more a form of play. You can move between states without fear of losing yourself, because you understand that you are not the state, you are the awareness in which all states come and go. The world responds faithfully to each assumption, but you are free to let them pass, to choose anew, to watch as reality rearranges itself with effortless obedience. And something unexpected begins to happen, because you no longer hold so tightly to any one form. The forms come more quickly, more beautifully, and with a precision you could not have planned. Opportunities arrive without striving, conversations unfold without strategy, needs are met before they are spoken. It is as though the universe has been waiting for you to release your grip, so it could finally place in your hands what was always yours. It is written, "All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made." You feel the truth of this in the marrow of your being. The him is not outside, it is the I am that imagines through you. And because all things are made by this presence, nothing in the outer world can oppose it.
To live in the knowing of this is to walk through the day without resistance, without fear, without the knowing sense that something is missing or could be taken away. The mornings then become less about constructing the day ahead and more about resting in this unshakable truth before you step into its reflection. You lie still and let the sense of completeness fill you until it overflows. If an image arises, you welcome it. If none comes, you remain in the quiet. Both are enough, because both are expressions of the same wholeness. And when you finally rise, the day unfolds not as something to manage, but as something already aligned with the state you have silently embraced. From this space, even challenges take on a different texture. They are no longer threats to your peace, but invitations to express more of the self you already are. A problem arises, and instead of scrambling to fix it, you return inward, assume the state from which the problem is already resolved, and watch as the outer shifts in kind. You do not fight with shadows, you change the light. Yet as natural as this becomes, there is still a quieter truth beyond it, a truth that cannot be spoken, but only entered. For if the self you assume is always drawn from the infinite, then the infinite itself, the source beyond all states, is closer to you than your own breath. And there may come a morning when you do not simply imagine from that source, but rest entirely as it. To rest entirely as the source is to find yourself beyond the shifting shapes of desire and fulfillment, beyond the choosing of states, beyond even the rhythm of imagining and receiving. It is to awaken in the morning and feel no distinction between the dream and the waking, between the inner and the outer, between the self and what it perceives. There is only being, silent self-knowing, complete. It is not the absence of creation, but the presence of creation in its purest form, before it takes on edges and names. In this stillness, the morning is no longer a moment in time, it is the eternal morning, the dawn that has no sunset. You open your eyes, but you are not entering a day that is separate from you. You are simply becoming aware of the light that has always been shining. The world rises within you, like a reflection upon calm waters, and you understand, without thought, that there is no out there. All is here, within the unbroken awareness that you are. From here, the law of assumption reveals its origin. The act of assuming is simply the movement of the infinite within itself, shaping itself into a particular experience. You, as the formless awareness, decide to taste yourself as love, as abundance, as health, as joy, and the reflection appears accordingly. But now you see that even without this movement, you remain whole. The forms are not needed for you to be complete. They are the way completeness chooses to express itself. This changes the flavor of creation entirely. You may still choose to begin the morning with an image of your desired end, but there is no tension in the choosing, no grasping in the holding. It is as effortless as the sun deciding where to cast its rays. You know the light does not strain to touch the earth, it simply shines, and the earth responds. And yet there is a sweetness in this way of living, for every form that arises is received as a gift, not as proof. You no longer need the world to confirm your state. It does so naturally, without your chasing. You move through the hours like one walking through a familiar garden, knowing that every flower, every path, every scent has sprung from the same soil. Whether you look upon a rose or a stone, it is all the same essence wearing different shapes. It is written, "I am the light of the world." When you hear these words from this place, they are no longer bound to the voice of another, they are your own. You feel yourself as the light in which every scene appears, the light that gives form to every shadow, the light that has never been diminished by the play of night and day. And when you feel this, even the act of assuming a state is understood as shaping the light into a particular picture upon the canvas of awareness. From here, the morning practice becomes less about preparation and more about recognition. You rise, you feel the completeness of being, and if a desire arises, you let it take form without resistance. If no desire comes, you rest in the quiet and let the day unfold from the fullness that is already here. Either way, you walk in the certainty that the outer world cannot contradict the inner truth, for it is made of the same substance. And yet even in this vast quiet, there is a mystery that draws you further inward, not toward something new, but toward the realization that there has never been a journey at all. The self you sought to transform was never other than the self you are now. The morning ritual, the assumptions, the manifestations, they have all been part of the dance by which the eternal has come to know itself in form. And when this is seen clearly, you may begin to wonder what it means to live, not as one who practices the truth, but as one who simply is the truth. To live as the truth itself is to find that every act, every thought, every breath flows from the same quiet center. You are no longer applying principles to reach a result. You are the principle in motion. The law of assumption is not something you practice. It is the nature of your being, expressing itself as naturally as a flame gives light or a river finds its course. You are not leaning toward the end. You are the end, the cause and the fulfillment, all present in a single unbroken awareness. When you wake in the morning, from this place, you do not enter the day with the thought, I will create. Instead, you feel the certainty, creation is already complete in me. The images you may choose to dwell on are no longer seeds you hope will grow. They are flowers you are already smelling, fruits you are already tasting. You savor them because they are here, now within the field of your being. And this is why the day unfolds with such ease. There is no resistance, because there is no gap to bridge. The people you meet, the words you hear, the opportunities that arise, each feels as though it has been arranged perfectly, not because you labored to assemble them, but because you stood still in the knowing that they were yours from the beginning. The morning sets the tone, but the tone is not effort, it is remembrance. Even the appearance of lack or discord cannot unsettle you for long. You see it as you might see a cloud passing across the sun, temporary, without power to change the light itself. If the shadow lingers, you simply return to the truth you already are, and the scene rearranges in response. You do not fight with the image in the mirror, you change the face you present to it. It is written, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Freedom is not granted in some distant future, when all conditions are perfect. It is here, in the moment you recognize that the truth of your being is untouched by any condition. This knowing becomes the quiet foundation of your mornings, so that even before you open your eyes, you are resting in the unshakable ground of freedom. From this ground, desire itself begins to feel different. It is no longer a reaching out, but an unfolding within. You feel the desire and its fulfillment as one motion, like the inhaling and exhaling of a single breath. You see that every desire you have ever held was not a signal of something missing, but a revelation of something already present, waiting to be acknowledged. And in the morning stillness, you acknowledge it fully, until there is no distinction between imagining and possessing. Life becomes less a path of becoming, and more a constant unveiling. You are not moving toward your good, you are letting your good move through you in whatever form it chooses. And because you have released the need to control its form, it often appears in ways more perfect than you could have conceived. The mind marvels, but the heart simply nods, for it knew all along. And as this way of living deepens, you begin to sense that there is no separation between the personal and the universal. The self that wakes in your bed is the same self that stirs the tides, the same self that causes the sun to rise. You are not merely in the world, you are the life of the world, wearing the mask of individuality, so that the infinite may enjoy its own reflection. Yet in the quiet space of the early morning, this truth carries you still deeper, toward the realization that even the dance between desire and fulfillment, between imagining and receiving, is but one layer of a greater mystery. For if you are the truth, and all things live and move within you, then perhaps the final secret is not about shaping reality at all, but about dissolving entirely into the boundless presence that shapes itself.
To dissolve into that boundless presence is to awaken into a stillness so vast that the idea of my life becomes as small and delicate as a single wave in an infinite ocean. You feel yourself no longer as the wave, with its rising and falling, but as the water itself, without beginning, without end, forever expressing yet never diminished. In this space there is no striving to shape reality, for reality is simply the movement of your own being. When the morning comes, it does not feel like a new day being given to you, but like a familiar song resuming from a note that was never paused. You open your eyes and the light enters, but you know it is your own light returning to greet you. Even the act of imagining becomes less about picturing and more about allowing the formless to take whatever shape it pleases, knowing all shapes are already contained within the whole. Here the law of assumption feels almost transparent, like a bridge you no longer need to cross, because you see you have always been on the other side. You still honor it, For it is the language by which the infinite speaks into form, but you know it now as something deeper than a method. It is the very nature of consciousness to reflect itself. And when you wake in the awareness of that truth, the reflection has no choice but to be perfect. Even the smallest motions of the morning, placing your feet upon the floor, drawing in your first breath, feel like acts of creation. You realize that every movement is the end state embodied, that you cannot take a step without walking within the reality you have claimed. The distinction between assuming and living fades, for they are the same act. You are not preparing for your desire. You are already inhabiting it in every gesture. It is written, "Behold, I make all things new," and in this space you feel those words not as a promise, but as an unbroken truth. Each moment, whether it appears as continuation or change, is entirely fresh, born directly from the stillness in which you rest. The past does not carry over unless you invite it. The future does not wait in uncertainty. It unfolds naturally from the wholeness of now. And so, when you lie in the soft quiet before rising, you may choose to shape a scene, or simply let the scene arise. You may feel the warmth of a fulfilled desire, or rest in the deeper warmth that exists without any specific form. Either way, the morning becomes an act of communion with yourself, not the small self of circumstance, but the self that holds all worlds within it. From this awareness, you look at the day ahead not as a series of events to navigate, but as the living canvas upon which your being paints. There is no fear of what will appear, for you know it cannot contradict its source. Even the unexpected is welcomed, for it must carry within it the same essence as the state you embody. You move gently, without hurry, because you know the end has already been written, and it was written in your favor. And yet, in this depth, a new wonder begins to open, a recognition that if all states, all desires, and all fulfillments are simply movements within the one presence, then the truest joy may not be in what is expressed, but in the awareness of being itself. This is the joy that does not depend on form, that cannot be taken by time, that does not fade with the passing of a scene. And as this awareness grows, you may begin to feel that the greatest morning you can ever have is not one in which you shape reality, but one in which you rest as the reality from which all shaping flows. To rest as the reality itself is to discover a peace so complete that it no longer requires evidence to sustain it. You are not waiting for the outer world to confirm anything, for the confirmation has already been received in the quiet knowing of your own being. The morning becomes a kind of sacred pause, not to summon or to fix, but simply to feel the sweetness of existing before the first word is spoken, before the first movement begins. It is here, in this unhurried stillness, that you sense the whole day contained, perfectly formed, already aligned with you. This awareness changes the texture of even the smallest thought. A desire may drift through your mind, like a bird passing overhead, and you smile, not because you must now go about capturing it, but because you know it has already come to rest within you. You do not chase, you receive. You do not measure the distance between yourself and what you want, for in this place there is no distance at all. The end and the beginning meet here, in the same breath. When you rise from bed in such a state, every action feels unforced, every encounter like the unfolding of a story, whose conclusion you have already read. You no longer carry the old tension that once accompanied your imaginings, that subtle fear of what if it doesn't work. For you have seen that the working was never a question, the reflection must follow the image, and the image lives entirely in you. It is written, "Thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever." These are not distant promises, they are descriptions of what you are. The kingdom is the state of consciousness in which you dwell. The power is your capacity to assume. The glory is the natural radiance of the fulfilled state expressed in form. And forever is the eternal now, in which all of it exists, before and beyond the turning of any clock. In this recognition, the act of morning assumption becomes less an effort to shift, and more a celebration of what is already true. You may picture yourself in the fullness of your desire, but you do so as one savoring a memory, not as one wishing for the future. You feel its reality, as inevitable, as present, as inseparable from who you are. And in this feeling, the mind no longer wanders into doubt, for doubt has no foothold in completion. The outer world begins to respond with a swiftness that can take your breath away, not because it was once unwilling, but because you have ceased to stand in the way. The more you live from the end, the more the end greets you in every corridor of your life. The right words find their way to you, the right doors open at the right moment, and all without strain. You realize that this is not the result of trying harder in your practice, but of releasing the belief that there is anything to try for at all. And yet, in this release, you do not lose the joy of creation, you simply find that it has changed shape. You no longer create to become, you create to express. Like a singer, who sings not to be heard, but because the song must pour forth, you assume states simply to let the fullness of being wear new garments. There is no fear of losing them, for you know that the source from which they come is inexhaustible. Still, there is a mystery in this place, one that draws you ever deeper, for when you live in such constant awareness of your own completeness, you begin to wonder what it would mean to let go even of the need to clothe that completeness in any particular image, to rise in the morning, and not only rest in the end, but rest in the formless, where all ends, and all beginnings, dissolve into the same radiant presence that has always been. To rise in the morning, and rest in the formless, is to awaken without the compulsion to define, without the mind's familiar urge, to label this moment as the beginning of something specific. You simply open your eyes, and allow the awareness of being to stand unshaped, like a field untouched by the plow, rich and whole in its stillness. There is no scene to construct, no state to hold, only the vast unbroken presence in which every possible state is already contained. In this space, the air itself feels softer, as though it too is resting from the work of becoming. Your breath moves without intention, and even the thought of the day ahead has no weight. You are not preparing to enter it, you are watching it rise within you, like the slow bloom of light before the dawn. Here, there is no separation between what is imagined and what is real, for all form is still resting in the womb of possibility. From this depth, the law of assumption is revealed in its purest simplicity. You see that assumption is nothing more than selecting a particular pattern from the infinite fabric of being, and allowing it to be felt as if it were the only truth. But when you stand in the formless, you are the whole fabric itself, every pattern, every possibility, already yours, without the need to choose. Choosing becomes a joy, not a necessity. The state you enter is not to complete you, but to express you. It is written, before they call, I will answer. You understand now that the answer exists before the question, because the formless holds the fulfillment, before the desire is even born. The desire is simply the form reaching out to meet the formless, from which it came, and when you wake in this awareness, the urgency of choosing a state fades, for you know that whatever arises in you already contains its perfect completion. You may still close your eyes, and picture a scene, seeing yourself embraced by love, surrounded by abundance, radiant in health, but you no longer feel it as a bridge to somewhere else. It is simply a brushstroke upon the canvas of the moment, a way to let the infinite take on a shape that pleases you for now. Tomorrow, it may take on another, and the joy will be the same, for the source is unchanged. The outer world responds to this stillness in a way that feels almost miraculous, though you recognize it as the most natural thing in the world. People sense something in you, an ease, a quiet confidence, a presence that does not seek to be validated. Circumstances fall into harmony, without the push and pull of effort. Even when events shift suddenly, they do so without disturbing your center, for you are no longer anchored to the form, but to the formless, from which all forms flow. And the mornings, once a place of deliberate practice, now feel like a homecoming. You wake not to create a reality, but to remember that reality itself is only the play of your own being. The shapes may change, but the field remains. The scenes may pass, but the present stays. You begin to see that the true gift of this morning awareness is not the power to get what you want, but the freedom to rest as the one who needs nothing in order to be whole. Yet, in the heart of this realization, there is a gentle pull towards something even greater, not a higher state, not a grander desire, but a deeper surrender, a surrender so complete that you no longer draw any line between yourself and the life that moves through you. where imagining is no longer an act you perform, but the very breath of your being, and in that breath, every morning is not only the start of a day, but the timeless unfolding of the self that has never been separate from its creation. To live in that breath, where imagining is no longer something you do, but something you are, is to awaken into a seamless union with creation itself. You feel no boundary between the inner and the outer, no sense of one preceding the other. The moment a thought rises, the world is already bending to it, not because you summoned it, but because you and it are born of the same still source. In this awareness, the morning is not a threshold between dreaming and waking, it is the continuous dream of God, in which you are both the dreamer and the dream. You open your eyes, and there is no need to reach for an image, or construct a scene. Even if a desire forms, it forms gently, like a ripple on a vast calm ocean. You know it will fulfill itself, because it already belongs to the water that gave it shape. There is no gap to close, no proof to demand. The proof is the very fact that you can feel it. You are not imagining to make it real, you are imagining because it is real. This is why the mornings become a sanctuary of ease. You rest, you breathe, and the whole of life seems to flow toward you, as effortlessly as the tide returns to the shore. There is no force in it, no calculation, only the steady silent correspondence between what you are and what appears. The world no longer feels like a place to navigate, it feels like a garment you are wearing, perfectly tailored to the state you inhabit without effort. It is written, for the kingdom of God is not in word, but in power. You understand now that this power is not in the struggle to hold an image or repeat a phrase until it feels true. The power is in the quiet certainty that your being is the source of all images, and that nothing can appear outside of it. You are not waiting for reality to change. Reality is waiting for you to notice that it already has. Even the so-called surprises of the day carry the scent of inevitability. A meeting you did not plan, a kindness you did not expect, a solution that seems to arrive from nowhere. All of these you recognize as the outer echo of an inner harmony. They do not shock you, yet they fill you with wonder, because you see them for what they are, living proof that the self you rested in upon waking is faithfully writing the script you now walk through. And so the morning no longer feels like preparation for life, it feels like the quiet recognition that life is already happening, in perfect accord with the tone you carry. If you choose to assume a specific end, you do so lightly, knowing it will appear. If you choose to remain in the formless, you trust that whatever arises will be of the same completeness you feel now. In both you are at peace. The more you dwell here, the less the distinction matters between shaping and allowing, between choosing and receiving. The current carries you regardless, and you begin to sense that even the choice itself is part of the current, flowing, effortless, inevitable. You stop thinking in terms of cause and effect, and start feeling in terms of expression and reflection. What is within shows itself without, not as a separate process, but as a single movement. Yet in this stillness, as each morning opens into the same eternal flow, there comes a subtle, luminous question, one that is not born of lack, but of sheer curiosity. If all that appears is the reflection of being, and being itself is limitless, then what new colors, what new worlds, what new forms of beauty are yet sleeping in the depths, waiting for you to awaken them simply by daring to feel them into life? It begins as a whisper in the depths of awareness, this quiet invitation to explore what has not yet taken form, not because you lack, not because you seek to repair, but because creation itself is joy, and joy longs to express. In the hush of morning, when thought has not yet scattered into the noise of the day, you can feel it, the subtle stirring, the way imagination breathes in the dark soil of your being. It does not rush, it does not plead, it simply waits for you to notice. To notice is to water the seed. The moment you give your attention to a possibility, it begins to unfold in ways the outer mind could never design. You do not need to think about how. The seed contains its own instruction. You only need to feel what it would be like if it were already the living reality, not as a performance, but as a gentle remembrance, as though you were retrieving a memory from a life you already lived. And when you do this in the morning, you discover why it is so powerful.
In these first moments of wakefulness, the border between the invisible and the visible is thin, and the mind has not yet gathered its resistance. You are still close to the silence from which all things emerge. Here, even a faint assumption is like a stone dropped into still water. It ripples outward, shaping the scenes of the day without strain. You may picture yourself in the end, resting in the home you love, speaking from the position you desired, smiling in the companionship of someone you cherish, and as you linger in that feeling, something happens. The outer picture fades, and what remains is the tone, a deep living tone that says, "This is so," and when the tone is there, the image becomes unnecessary, for the tone alone draws its likeness in the world. It is written, "Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." In the morning, this faith is not an effort, it is the natural state of the soul before the day demands proof. You realize that proof is not something you wait for, it is something you carry, like a fragrance, and the world responds in kind. This is why what you assume upon waking often becomes the shape of the hours ahead. But the beauty of this practice is that it is not bound to grand visions. Some mornings, the mental trick may be as simple as assuming that today flows with grace, that every encounter brings peace, that you walk in safety and abundance without thought, and you watch as small, almost imperceptible details align themselves, a smile from a stranger, a problem resolved before you could worry, a sense of timing so perfect it leaves you in quiet awe. The more you live this way, the more you see that the morning is not a preparation for reality, but the planting of it. What you water here will rise later, often in ways you could not have scripted, and the more you trust this, the less you will try to interfere with the growth. You will not dig up the seed to check its progress, you will let it rest, knowing it is already becoming what you have assumed it to be. Yet there remains a deeper layer to this morning ritual, one that reveals itself only after you have played in it long enough to see its faithfulness. It is the realization that the seed you plant is never separate from the one who plants it, that the dream and the dreamer are the same. And if that is so, then perhaps the greatest act you could perform upon waking is not only to choose the scene, but to awaken fully to the one who holds the power to dream all scenes into being. It is a humbling thing to realize that the one who imagines and the world imagined are not two. At first you may think of the morning exercise as something you do to influence what lies outside you. You picture, you feel, you assume, and you wait for the evidence to appear. But slowly, a softer, more startling truth begins to dawn. There is no outside for it to appear, and there is only the reflection of the self you are daring to be. This is why the smallest shift within you alters the vast design without you. The scene in your mind is not a request sent to a distant power, it is the unveiling of the very substance from which all forms are made. You are not speaking to the universe, you are speaking as it. You are not convincing a reluctant world, you are awakening your own image into visibility. And in the morning, when the mind is tender and unarmored, this truth is easiest to feel. You may lie still, letting your breathing settle, and imagine not as a worker crafting something to sell, but as a child, playing in a garden that already belongs to them. The joy of it is in the being, not in the getting, and because there is no strain, the scene breathes with life. When you rise from such a morning, you carry the fragrance of that garden into every step. People feel it in your presence, though they cannot name it. Circumstances bend toward you with quiet precision, not because you have forced them, but because the pattern was already cast in the stillness. You find yourself less inclined to chase, less inclined to plead, for you begin to understand that you cannot lose what you have truly assumed. It is written, "Be still and know that I am God." In the quiet moment before the day begins, you come to know, not as an idea, but as an experience, that this I am is the root of all your scenes. You do not ask it to work for you, you allow yourself to be it. And when you walk into the day as that awareness, you discover that even the most ordinary events glisten with the same light as the morning vision. Perhaps this is the real secret behind the mental trick. It is not a trick in the sense of deception, it is a return to the truth before the mind forgets. Every morning offers you a chance to step into the identity that shapes the day, not by hoping for it, not by rehearsing it with a sense of absence, but by wearing it now, before the first task is done. You will notice how this transforms the quality of your decisions. When you have already felt yourself as the one who possesses the desire, you no longer act from lack. The phone call you make is tinged with certainty. The words you choose carry a calm authority. Even delays lose their sting, for you are not waiting, you are living in the midst of what is. And yet there is another unfolding, one that emerges the longer you practice. You begin to sense that the identities you assume are themselves part of a larger garment. The home, the love, the health, these are threads, but the fabric is the self that holds them all. To wake in the morning and choose a scene is beautiful, but to wake and recognize the one who can choose any scene is to touch the heart of freedom. And when you stand in that freedom, a question stirs in the depths. If I am the source of every scene, what then is the highest vision I could dare to assume?
And as that question rises, you feel its weight and wonder. What is the most exalted self you could dare to be? Not the self bound by the small habits of yesterday, nor the one content to circle the same familiar patterns, but the self who walks as if every word spoken is creative law, as if every glance carries the fragrance of eternity. This is no longer a vision of a single desire fulfilled. It is the remembrance of your origin, the reclaiming of the name you bore before the world, whispered limitations into your ears. It is here that the morning becomes more than a ritual. It becomes a sacred return. You lie in that threshold between sleep and waking, and instead of hastily reaching for the garments of the day's worries, you reach for the robe of light that was always yours. You slip it over your being, by simple feeling, by quiet recognition, by an inner acknowledgement that you and your highest ideal are one and the same. This is not mere affirmation, for affirmations often speak from separation. This is identification. This is embodiment. You are not saying I will be. You are knowing I am, and in that knowing, the world rearranges itself to mirror the changeless fact you have embraced. The streets you walk are no longer hostile or indifferent. They are the corridors of your own imagination, dressed in the symbols you have woven in stillness. You begin to notice that the mornings you give to this practice possess a quality that lingers. It is not the scene itself that matters most, but the tone, the vibration you carry. Even if the exact images shift, the essence remains, the quiet authority, the deep ease, the unshakable sense that the day cannot help but obey the self you have dared to be. And so, each morning, you are not starting from nothing. You are continuing a tapestry, adding threads of light to a garment you will wear in full view. Sometimes, in the midst of this, an old thought will creep in, a voice that whispers, "But what if it doesn't work?" And here you must remember, that voice is not a prophecy, but a seed. If you water it with fear, it will bear the fruit of its kind. If you let it pass like a shadow over still water, it dissolves and leaves no trace. You are the keeper of your morning soil. Only the seeds you choose to plant with feeling will grow into the forest of your days. You will find, too, that the more you practice, the less you need to force the scene. It becomes natural, effortless. You close your eyes and immediately feel the shift, the quiet alchemy of assumption. You do not strain to see. You allow yourself to be, and in that allowing, the invisible shapes itself into the visible, with a precision no human effort could match. It is in these moments you understand why the scriptures speak in such absolute terms. What things soever ye desire, when ye pray, believe that ye receive them, and ye shall have them. To believe is not to hope, it is to enter the state now, before a single outer change has occurred, and to rest there as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And once you have touched that rest, the question deepens still. If the world must take the shape of the self I choose to be, then what heights am I willing to ascend before the first light touches my eyes? And as that question lingers, you begin to realize that the highest self you dare to assume is not a distant summit you climb toward, but the quiet truth that has been waiting for your recognition all along. It does not strain or reach, it simply is. When you let the morning carry you into this awareness, you are not creating a new self from nothing. You are uncovering the eternal self beneath the dust of memory and the weight of appearances. You feel it in the stillness before thought begins, in that brief and holy pause where the mind has not yet named the day. It is here, in this gap, that the mental trick becomes more than habit. It becomes a portal. You see yourself not as one who is becoming, but as one who already is. The law responds not to effort, but to identity. And when identity is certain, the day obeys without resistance. Many believe they must first prove themselves worthy of the vision they hold, but worthiness is not earned in time, it is claimed in consciousness. The robe of your ideal is not awarded to you for good behavior. It is already hanging in the wardrobe of your mind, waiting for you to put it on. Each morning, as you assume the feeling of that robe against your skin, you find that life rushes to match the dignity with which you walk. Even the smallest details bend to this choice. The faces you meet carry new expressions. Conversations seem to tilt toward your good. Circumstances, those supposed strangers, arrange themselves like well-rehearsed actors in a play you have written in silence. You begin to understand why the ancient text declared, "Call those things which be not as though they were," and why this is not poetry alone, but the mechanics of creation itself. Yet as you walk in this awareness, you will notice the subtle temptation to measure results, to check the soil for sprouts before their appointed hour. This is where many lose the fragrance of the state they have chosen. For the morning vision is not meant to be interrogated, it is meant to be lived in. When you believe a thing is yours, you do not watch the door in anxiety for its arrival. You move through the day as one for whom it is already settled. This is why the practice must be felt, not merely thought. Words without feeling are like seeds without soil, but a single morning moment, steeped in true inner conviction, outweighs hours of empty repetition. The world cannot resist the pull of such assumption, it is compelled to mirror it. And in this quiet certainty, you discover that you no longer fight against appearances. The shadows that once threatened you are seen now for what they are, reflections of old assumptions that are already dissolving. You do not chase them away, you simply stand in the light of your chosen identity until they vanish of their own accord. It is a strange and holy thing, this shift, how effortlessly the outer bends when the inner is fixed. And so you return to the question, not in doubt but in awe. If the world will obey the self I dare to claim each morning, then what greater beauty, what deeper joy, what higher name shall I put on tomorrow? And so the morning becomes a sacred mirror, revealing not what the world has decreed for you, but what you have dared to decree for yourself. You stand before this invisible reflection, not with the eyes of flesh, but with the eyes of the heart, and you see the self that already dwells in the fulfillment of every longing. You see them move with ease through the corridors of the day, untouched by the clamoring noise of circumstance. You watch as they carry the fragrance of certainty into each encounter, and you recognize, this is you not in some distant future, but here, now, clothed in the awareness of being. It is here that the law performs its quiet work, for consciousness does not strain to make its likeness known, it simply expresses. The oak does not struggle to prove itself, it grows from the certainty hidden in its seed. So too does the life you see in this morning vision grow without visible effort, for its roots are sunk deep in the assumption that it already is. Most wake to the day as servants to its events, hoping to steer them by reaction or force, but you wake as master, setting the tone before a single thing has touched you. And this mastery is not loud or forceful, it is gentle, almost secret, for the power is not in what the eyes behold, but in what the inner eye refuses to forget. You begin to notice how the outer world falls in step with this inner choice. Opportunities approach with a naturalness that makes them feel inevitable. Solutions to old problems emerge in forms you could never have devised. People respond to you as though they have known, all along, the truth you now claim. It is as if the stagehands of the unseen have rearranged the scenery overnight to match the role you have decided to play. This is why the ancients could say with such boldness, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." They understood that the heart's belief is not a passing thought, but a dwelling place. To live in the end is to pitch your tent in the land of the desired state, and refuse to wander, no matter what mirages appear along the way. There is a great calm that comes when you no longer bargain with appearances. You cease pleading with the outer to change, for you see it now as the servant of the inner, and in that calm, you discover that the speed of your manifestation is not determined by time, but by the firmness of your inner stance. Each morning, as you return to this place within, you are not repeating a ritual for the sake of habit. You are re-entering the throne room of your own creation. You sit where the decree is made, and you speak in the silent language of feeling. The world listens, though it may seem deaf to the casual eye, and it answers with precision. And yet within this sacred act lies a deeper mystery, one that few dare to approach. For if the world obeys whatever image you choose to inhabit, then who, truly is choosing? What is this self that can imagine any form, take any name, wear any fate? What happens when you go beyond merely assuming a better version of your life,
and begin to touch the source from which all versions arise. It is here, in the quiet wonder of that question, that you begin to sense the vastness of what you are. The one who imagines is not bound by the image. The one who chooses a self each morning is greater than the self that is chosen. Like an artist who paints with light, you can set aside one canvas and take up another without losing yourself, and yet most live as though the first picture they drew is the only truth they can ever know. When you wake and enter the stillness before the day begins, you can feel this deeper presence, the one who wears identities as garments, yet is clothed in nothing but pure being. It is untouched by yesterday's failures, unseduced by tomorrow's fears. This presence is not chasing a better life, it is life itself. All that you have ever claimed has sprung from this root, and all that you will ever claim rests in its hand. If you let yourself remain here for even a moment, the fear of choosing wrongly dissolves, for you see that the law is no respecter of persons. It answers the assumption, whatever it may be. The seed does not care who plants it, it will yield after its kind. And so the only real question each morning is, what seed am I willing to place in the soil of my own being? When you understand this, the mental trick becomes more than a tool, it becomes a declaration of authorship. No one can step into your imagination and write the lines for you. No circumstance can seize the pen from your hand. You are both the scribe and the king, whose decree the scribe records, and the decree is never delayed. It begins to move the moment it is spoken in the language of feeling. This is why the outer world sometimes shifts in ways that seem sudden, even miraculous. It is not that the change happened overnight, it is that the change was already complete, the moment you accepted it as done within yourself. Time merely unfolds the invisible into the visible, the way a flower opens to reveal what was hidden in the bud. Yet the mind, restless and untrained, will often rush to interfere. It will question the decree, it will ask for signs, for proofs, for guarantees, but the presence you are does not answer to such demand. It simply holds to its choice, with the quiet certainty of the sun rising. In this certainty, the noise of doubt fades into silence, and as you live more often from this place, you begin to feel the weight of the old self slipping away. The self that was anxious, the self that was small, the self that bowed to circumstance, all dissolve like shadows in the light. You do not have to fight them, you simply stop wearing them. But then comes another stirring question, like a whisper from the infinite. If I can wear any self, and the world will shape itself to fit that self, what would happen if I chose to wear, not just the image of a fulfilled life, but the image of the one who fulfills all things? What would happen if I dared to see myself as that? To see yourself as the one who fulfills all things, is to step beyond the narrow gate of personal desire, into the wide country of divine identity. Here, the morning trick becomes more than a shaping of circumstances, it becomes the recognition that you are the very life by which circumstances are shaped. You are no longer a petitioner at the gates of destiny, you are the gate through which destiny enters the world. In the stillness before the day begins, this awareness comes not as thunder, but as a breath. It does not announce itself with grandeur, it simply is. You notice it in the way the mind falls silent without effort, in the way the body feels light, unburdened, and then you understand. You are not calling upon something outside to bless your life, you are the blessing, you are the root and the branch, the seed and the harvest. When this recognition takes hold, even the smallest act of imagination is infused with power. To picture a healed body is no longer to beg for health, it is to remember that wholeness has never left you. To imagine abundance is not to strive for gain, it is to acknowledge that nothing has ever been withheld. You are simply clothing eternal supply in the garments of your present form. This is why the ancient words carry such weight, when heard from this place. Be still, and know that I am God. Not be still and hope, not be still and plead, be still and know. It is a knowing that requires no proof, because it is its own proof. And as you rise from this stillness into the movement of the day, everything you touch becomes an outflow of that knowing. The people you meet will feel it before they understand it. They will sense that you carry an atmosphere that cannot be disturbed, as though you walk within a light they cannot name, and without conscious effort, you will begin to speak, act, and decide in ways that align perfectly with the reality you have accepted within. Even challenges, when they appear, lose their teeth. You see them as shadows cast by an old self you no longer inhabit. They pass before you like clouds across a sky that remains untouched and clear. And in this clarity, you realize that the morning trick, the deliberate assumption of your chosen state, is not merely a technique to influence life, it is the daily unveiling of who you are in truth. But this truth holds within it a doorway that most will not pass through, for it asks for the surrender of all that is familiar. It asks you to lay aside not only your fears, but also your cherished limitations, your comfortable patterns, even your definitions of what is possible. And beyond that doorway waits a question that will not leave you. If I am the source of all I see, what new world am I willing to let be born through me? And so it is that the journey returns to the beginning, yet not as the same soul who first stood at the threshold. You have moved through the quiet corridors of your own being, and discovered the light that was always there, waiting for recognition. What once seemed a fragile practice, a small morning act of imagination, has unfolded into the very heartbeat of your existence. It is no longer a trick to bend life toward your will, but the natural breathing of the one who knows that all things proceed from within. You rise now not to seek, but to remember. Each morning is the gentle unveiling of the kingdom that was hidden in plain sight, the kingdom within. There is no strain in this remembrance, no desperate clutching for evidence. The seed has been sown, and you live in the quiet assurance that the harvest is certain. Just as the dawn does not fight to appear, so your life unfolds without struggle, when aligned with the end already accepted. The world may still rush around you, voices clamoring for your attention, shadows trying to pull you back into the old dream of separation, but you stand as the still center in the turning wheel, unmoved by the outer scene. You know now that appearances are but echoes of what you have already established in the unseen, and you trust them to change as surely as winter yields to spring. The mind that once doubted now rests. It has been tamed by the consistent proof of your own experience, by the way life has answered you faithfully, even when the answers took forms you did not expect. And you see the beauty in that too, the unexpected turn, the sudden opening, the way grace weaves through every detail, often beyond your conscious design. This morning act has become less about crafting specific scenes, and more about dwelling in the fragrance of the fulfilled state. You walk into it as one steps into sunlight, letting it warm you, letting it seep into the deepest places, until there is no part of you untouched. And in that warmth, gratitude blooms without effort. You cannot help but give thanks, not because you are begging for more, but because you see that you already stand in the fullness you once longed for. And if there is any final word, it is not a command, but an invitation. Dare to live as though the miracle is already yours. Let the day ahead be shaped not by the echoes of yesterday, but by the living vision you hold now. For as surely as the sun knows to rise, life will obey the image you persist in honoring. It is here, in this quiet mastery, that the words take on their full truth. According to your faith be it unto you. And your faith is no longer a fragile hope. It is the steadfast knowing that the God you seek is the very self that imagines and feels, the self that dares to call things which are not seen as though they were, and then rests, knowing they will appear. And so the morning comes again, and you close your eyes, not to escape the world, but to command it from within. You step into the end, feel its life in your veins, breathe its air, and know it is done.